This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey, man. Just after watching Sneakers, managed to pull myself away from Dragon Age Inquisition for a little while. Currently head of a kingdom in that game. Executed a few people last night. Put somebody who threw a goat against my castle walls in a giblet. I must admit, when I did that, I didn't know what a giblet was. But yeah, good ruling. Yeah, so Sneakers. I don't really know how coherent these thoughts are going to be, because I've just watched it and it's a lot in a way. So I'm going to present this as in a form of questions to you for when you get to it, or if you've already got to it, and maybe questions for myself as well, because I'm really trying to lay my thoughts out there for this one, especially just after seeing it. So my first question is this the first, well, not the first, but the first that I certainly know of, is this what happens when you make a highbrow comedy? And is this what happens when you treat comedy seriously? Because for all my mind, watching this movie, I couldn't figure out if the comedy was a help or a hindrance to the script. The movie starts off, and it's quite a journey, because this movie was made in 1992, and it's probably so much ahead of its time when it comes to the tech element and this kind of conversation that we're having now, in terms of it's not about weapons, it's about information, to quote Ben Kingsley in this movie, and just having access to all these networks and different abilities through tech makes you really powerful. And the movie starts off presenting itself almost like a 1970s, 1960s, maybe not 1980s, but in its staging and its type of acting, and especially with Robert Redford at the helm. He's such a movie star, and just how this presents itself to begin with in its staging and how the actors move around the room is something like you would see in The Hustler with Paul Newman, or The Sting, which I believe had Redford and Newman from memory, and even some westerns starring our good friend Jimmy Stewart, Murray. And then it almost has this screwball element in it to begin with as well. And I was really trying to place myself with the feel of this movie. And then at a certain point, when James Horner's score piped in, and the central mystery and thrilling nature of this movie started to take place, I started to wonder, is the comedy even necessary? I'm still so confused over if the comedy in this movie is a good thing or a bad thing. Now, for the most part, it does nail the comedy, and it almost seamlessly can come back from things bordering on farce and things that would normally take me out of it in another movie. But because Robert Redford, say for the end scene maybe, doesn't know he's in a movie that's even meant to be remotely funny, he plays this so straight and plays this straight even for the straight man role. He's almost oblivious to the type of comedy that's going on at times. Even when he's playing comedic moments, he's doing it almost in a way that it's just a bizarre situation that he has to do, and it's real. There's a scene early on where he has to go into the office and they're trying to hack this guy. I think it's Donnie Logan. Is that the guy? He looked a bit familiar anyway. And he gets caught by the mistress, and he's getting said information in his ear what to say. And he managed to pull off that in a way that doesn't take you out of what is presented at times as a very serious conspiracy thriller. And not a lot of movies can do that. And there's even jokes early on where the blind character played by David, I can never pronounce his surname, David Strathairn, an actor that I really like. He shows up in Wind River and The Expanse, among other things. And he, in the opening scene, is watching, well, sorry, not watching, but he's reading a Braille Playboy edition, which is something completely out of something like Robin Hood, Men in Tights, or Top Secret. And I was thinking, boy, if they're just going to keep putting in sight gags like this, I wonder what we're going to be in for here. And my other question is, even after that Playboy Braille gag, is the comedy functional to the moment-to-moment beats of what's happening in the movie as well? We get a scene later on where they have to take somebody's voice and put it into this voice recognizer so Robert Redford can get into this location later on in the movie. And there's a scene where he plays the voice that he's managed to record quick, and it's a funny gag, but it's almost like something would happen as well. If your life was a comedy, almost, is the best way of describing it. And there's a lot of scenes like that. Even the scene where Dan Aykroyd is talking about all those conspiracy theories. Sidney Poitier, another straight man, brilliant actor, he just simply says, I don't want to talk to you anymore, which kind of normalizes the scene and brings it back from farce. Now, I have information for you, Michael, as well, that I looked this up, right? So apparently Playboy did release a Braille edition in 1979. So even the sight gag, or non-sight gag, as the case of the blind character in this, even that has a basis in reality, which is absolutely fucking crazy. We even get a kind of Bond villain origin story in this opening scene set in 1969, where Robert Redford's character and Ben Kingsley's character as youngins are doing something in a college computer, and Ben Kingsley gets arrested, and Robert Redford gets away, and they're just basically doing a prank. And then next time we see Ben Kingsley later in the movie, he's some Bond villain mastermind. And is that meant to be funny? Are they spoofing that, or have they just gone for it in terms of the massive scale of this movie? I just can't figure it out, because the balance is played so well, and at a certain point the comedy started adding a lot to the tension and the thrill of things as well. And even there's one scene where Mary McDonnell, she has to go undercover, and she said they're trying to fix her up with trying to fix the blind date with somebody who the person they're trying to break into his office would go for. And then Mary McDonnell, it says something like, no, this guy, he's not after a model, he's after someone that's meticulous and anal. And then there's a big pause, and then they look at her, and I know they're looking at her because she's perfect for that role, but I'm thinking, are they looking at her because she said anal? I couldn't figure it out. And then there's a scene later on where River Phoenix is in the rafters or in the pipes or whatever you want to say, and it's meant to look like he's going to do something techie or spectacular, and then he just jumps through the rafters and lands on the two henchmen. And it's just filmed and played in such a way that, are these things meant to be intentionally funny, or am I just finding them funny because the movies warmed me up so much in all the other obvious comedy? And it's not heavy-handed with the comedy either. In fact, there's large sections where the comedy largely disappears for a while and then starts to come back. And then even when we do have the comedy at certain moments, when they're playing Scrabble, trying to break a code, and they come up with the word jumble of, I think it's rat semen. It's just almost like something somebody would do. A lot of this comedy is what someone would do, and what someone with a sense of humor might do in these situations, I guess. And Robert Redford's fucking brilliant in this as well. He's in his full man with the gun type, honourable rogue, charm, offensive. Thought he was very good. And just the thriller side of this, I thought this does thriller better than most thrillers nowadays. And it just knows the beats, the hits so well that I was really invested in this absolute ridiculous narrative, I guess. Obviously, it starts off, they're ethical hackers and they're trying to just make a living, and they get put with a proposition to, I think, rob this box, and then it just keeps on getting larger and larger, and it feels like a small indie movie. Obviously, it probably isn't, and it has very Hollywood people involved, but I feel like if it came out now, it would be a lot more of a small indie. But obviously, if you got Robert Redford and you've got James Horner's score, it's got massive Hollywood cinematic appeal in a way, even though this isn't the most cinematic, it still knows how to hit you with those cinematic moments. Like the scene where Robert Redford goes to the two national security goons, and Sidney Poitier just reads in the paper that the scientist has got assassinated. That was such a great way to reveal that. And then he's just telling him, get to the car. That's an amazing scene. And there's a few like that that's absolutely running through this movie. And now that I think about it, even one of the things with the heist at the end requires Robert Redford to walk really slowly to a room, which is really funny when he has to rush it, but it's played funny in a way that it's just a funny situation and not played for ridiculous laughs. It just fits the moment as well, and he even makes reference to it when one of the characters tells him, move quicker, and he says, well, that's one of the one things I can't do. And it's just played very nicely. Now, the supporting cast, I think, are a bit... I feel like the likes of River Phoenix and David Strathairn and Ben Kingsley especially play it a little bit more broad in terms of the comedy that, oh, well, this is the comedy, I better be fucking goofy with this. And maybe they don't toe the line as well. And it's funny when we were talking about when we were playing Cinematrix before, it made us realize how little we know about actors' careers that seem like really important to our cinematic lives. And Dan Aykroyd shows up in this, and he was one of these actors we recognized that they haven't really fucking done anything as far as our cinematic lives, but it seems like they're around so much all the time. And when he appeared on screen, I was like, Danny Boy! And Danny Boy just done fuck all. Surprisingly, he didn't even do it very broad or add anything to the role. So maybe they just, oh, let's put somebody that's comedic there because this is meant to be a comedy. And I think River Phoenix is a little bit off tonally compared to the comedy of this movie, and David Strathairn is as well. But David does manage to pull off the scene where he has to drive blindly to rescue Robert Redford later on in the movie. He managed to pull that off very well. That was good. And then it's almost like when everything's over at the end of the movie, then everyone can relax, and the final scene is like, whoa, god damn it, why don't you, oh you guys. And the movie manages to really be thriller first with comedic moments up until that point. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm still processing what I've managed to watch exactly, and if all the elements work together all the time. I guess through this voice note to you, I'm saying it did, but I'll have to think on it a bit more.
Hey man, listened to your message last night, just getting around to replying to it now. Just headed into the house, down to the nursery, got my sunglasses. A bit windy as well, I'm not sure if that might be messing up the recording. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting like hearing you talk about the movie, and I find sometimes I'll watch a film and there'll be one aspect of it that will just confuse me and like just set me on the back foot. And I'm like, I'm struggling to pin the movie down. I'm spending half the time to like trying to navigate this single question of, you know, in this case, is it a comedy, or what type of a comedy it is? I mean, your voice message, you must have said the word comedy about 17 times, whereas and I would imagine most people watch this movie and don't even think about comedy. To me, it's not a comedy. I mean, it's completely subjective, and I think when it comes to genres, it's just whatever you say it is, or whatever it is to you, that's the most that it can be something. But I would say this is a comedy as much as Ocean's 11, Jurassic Park, the Fast and the Furious movies, the MCU movies. By that I mean there's a joke a minute, it's non-stop jokes, but the focus of the movie is not a comedy. Now again, this is just my way of taking it, but to me the film was just pretty much the same as any other kind of crowd pleaser, popcorn, thriller blockbuster type thing. It's similar to other caper movies like Now You See Me or something. Like, I would imagine the joke count is similar to Now You See Me. It didn't strike me as like a like Naked Gun type spoof or something. I mean, you were kind of alluding to that being like, it was like, is it like I don't know, is it a send up, or, are things supposed to be taken as real? Like the thing with Braille Playboy, I mean, to me, I just took that as like, that was one of the most popular magazines that people also bought for the journalism and the interviews and articles and stuff, and that's what he was reading. It's supposed to be funny, obviously. Probably a joke that you wouldn't do nowadays, but that's about as wacky as the jokes get. Most of the jokes aren't wacky like that. I think if you look at something like Ocean's 11, you'll have one or two more wacky jokes. Then for the most part, it's just kind of character-based humor. So yeah, I didn't look at this movie as some sort of like mishmash of different genres or tones or sensibilities, and but it was consistent in a way. And sorry, it's getting very, very windy now, so I'm not sure how much of this you're getting. I'm trying to cup the microphone on my phone. Not sure if that's making any difference. But yeah, I liked the movie. I thought it struck a good tone. It's interesting, like you mentioned, the sting, that definitely came to mind, probably because of Redford, but also just beyond the Redford connection. I think it's that thing of like, we're the crew doing the job, but we're on the back foot right from the beginning, and it's almost like we're the job is to save ourselves kind of thing. So we habitually take on scores or whatever, but this time it's personal, because I think what's actually riding on the line is our freedom or whatever it might be. And there's quite a few caper movies like that. In fact, I recently watched the animated film The Bad Guys, which I think is fantastic. And it's a often when you get like an animated movie that's like a take on, it's like a children's cartoon take on an established genre, like a film noir or whatever it might be. Often I find that those can actually be like just really, really solid entries into that subgenre on their own terms, rather than, oh, it's just interesting as a children's cartoon spin on that. And I don't know why that is, but I think, the part of it has got to be, well, because we're switching into a completely different arena, i.e. children's cartoons, we want to kind of signpost the genre that we're taking on as much as possible with the music and the dialogue and everything like that. So they actually end up being like a perfect encapsulation of that genre and everything that genre does well, with a little, a certain bit of children's cartoon energy thrown in on top. So having watched that in the last few months, and kind of like thinking about caper movies and thinking about what are the hallmarks and the ingredients that make them work, it's interesting to now go back to Sneakers and go, it's all here. So like, I don't know how early this stuff got crystallized, but definitely by 92 or whenever this film came out, I feel like it had been formalized to the point where this is not really missing anything. You could maybe argue that it's missing a big CGI action scene, because now when this movie comes out, it's more likely to be like a Fast and Furious type situation. But in terms of like the pure caper movie, this has got it all. I agree on the cast. I think, again, with the comedy stuff, I didn't feel that the comedy or the zanier comedy moments kind of swallowed up many of the performances. I do think that River Phoenix brings the least to the movie, but I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I don't think he's anything special as an actor. I think almost all of his iconic status came from his unfortunate early death. And obviously he's very attractive, so he became like, the James Dean effect or whatever. Not to say that James Dean isn't a talented actor, but that like if you're both good looking and die young, then you're kind of setting yourself up for being iconic. But he isn't given much to do either. I think that Aykroyd is a really good character. I just like all the banter between everyone. I think to have 5 or 6 characters kind of at the heart of the film that are the team, to have them all be sort of different and distinct, not just in like one. It's not like, oh, this guy, he likes playing hip hop. It's not as superficial as that. They actually have different personalities, and those different personalities bounce off one another repeatedly to the point where you kind of feel like you're in, season 2 of a TV show by the end of it. Like it's got that real kind of little found family vibe to it. And I like that. I like how it's a pretty good-natured, comfortable little movie. Reminds me of Buffy or something, which is to be expected. It's not like this genre is normally really dark and hard-hitting, but I like the comforting family nature of the gang. Like, for example, they didn't do one of the gang crosses them over. Or they didn't do much in the way of internal politics and falling out, which I like, to be honest. I think in this movie it works well. As you said, Redford's got the movie star charisma. As much as he is a super famous movie star with many iconic movies to his name, I still think he's kind of underrated. Maybe it's because we're a bit too young to like have been around when he was sort of on top, but just as a little bit forgotten when you see the kind of charisma that he is able to deliver, relatively late into his career, still 30 years ago, but good all-around movie. I liked the plans. It gets very tense. It's interesting that this came out just 4 years, I think, before the Langley heist in Mission Impossible. There's a lot of kind of similarity there, a lot of overlap. And I want to see movies like this again, man. I want to see movies that get all of their big sort of blockbuster moments from situations and writing and dialogue, and not just explosions and things, skyscrapers collapsing and stuff. I want to see the stakes played out in a really human, relatable way. Now, I've made it to the nursery now, so I've got to pick up my daughter. I might drop some more thoughts in if they come to me. But I was pleased with the movie. It's a slight movie. It's not like something I'm going to remember much about going forward. And I don't know. I got what I wanted out of it. I was a bit tired, watched it in 2 sittings. But I think if you want to put it this way, if someone asks me, I want a caper movie or a heist movie or something like this, I think it's a very reliable recommendation. Very, very reliable. Now, if someone just wants to watch a movie in general, I don't know if it's the essential viewing. It's not in the top 50 best movies in the 90s or anything like that. But like for the thing that it's trying to do, I think it kind of nails it, to be honest. And yeah, you're right. The end bit does sort of switch it up in terms of a bit like, okay, now we're getting silly here with them all requesting, I want a yacht, I want this or whatever. But that's fun, man. It's a fun movie. Just another couple of things popped into my head about the movie. Probably the earliest Stephen Tobolowsky, if that's his name, performance that I've seen. I think this would have come before Groundhog Day. He's always a pleasure to see, like such a great little character actor to pop up. What you were saying about like how the film is kind of ahead of its time in the sort of coveted object being data, like that, I couldn't agree more. That's really novel, and it must have been like very unusual to see. I guess it was. I'm even surprised that they were so bang on the money, because there was a lot of computery stuff coming out then in movies where they were like computers and the internet and network and database. This is the new technology, but it was when you look back on it now, it's all laughable. It's all kind of ridiculous, and it all relies on an audience who doesn't understand it. It's probably written by screenwriters who doesn't understand it. And even, I suppose, the world at large didn't really understand where things were headed. Whereas this film, either by look or by some sort of expertise, it manages to fairly accurately predict what is important about computing and what is valuable about computing and networking and the internet. So that was really good to see. But also it kind of speaks to how they get the details right in this movie. Like the security system that they have to get past, it's not ridiculous in what it has, like what kind of security measures it has in place. Obviously it's state of the art, but it's not ridiculous. Like, for example, the temperature control thing, that isn't science fiction. That's just like, a top level security system. And then their way of beating it is gradually increase the temperature in the room to body temperature, so that when someone walks in, it matches their body temperature. It's just like smart, realistic, not over-egging it, but also like they're clearly very smart and focused on the details, and I really appreciated that. The one bit of technology in the movie that I could see that is ridiculous, and only now in the age of like AI, generative AI and all that, can we actually start to do this. But for many, many years, any sort of crime thriller, high-tech thriller, whatever, would have this cliche of they zoom in on something that's completely blurry or pixelated, or you can't make it out at all, and then they say enhance, and the guy taps a couple of keys and we get a more high-res version of it. They do that in this. In fact, they do it off a VHS recording, which is even more like unlikely to work. And that, I actually love that, because it's so ridiculous and it's so ubiquitous across these movies that it just kind of, when I see it, I'm like, oh, enhance. Been a while since I've seen enhance. They don't really do it anymore. So I actually appreciated that the one ridiculous detail in this movie that completely stretches credulity in terms of technology or a operational detail was one that I happen to have a lot of affection for. But yeah, other than that, across the board, really I'm sure you did as well, but I predicted a fair bit of the when Ben Kingsley takes the answering machine, it's not in the answering machine, so there was a few nice things like that. But and also I like how it's not the most high tech. They're not the most brilliant people in the world. Like when they sort of mess up, I know it kind of comes down to this, like a computer would never match him and her together. Like that is a bit sort of silly, but when they do mess up, it's a bit frantic, and it's just sort of like working your way through corridors, asking for information. Like it's quite believable. I mean, anytime I watch any heist related material, I inevitably start fantasizing about doing a heist myself. Like probably one of my top 3 all-time dreams. In fact, I wanted to be their job at the beginning of the movie, where they go to companies and they go, I'll do a heist on your place of business and then you pay me because I'm testing your security. I mean, that would just be like having your cake and eating it. But yeah, whenever I think about it, like doing a heist, I think about, let's say I did have to rob an art museum or something. I imagine it would go down a little bit like this, in terms of there'd be bits where I was sort of on top, where I was my many hours of preparation and studying the building and everything are paying off, and their preparation it's quite believable. They get the blueprints of the building, that's believable. They figure out the employee that's in the office beside the thing, believable, I can see that. They sort of socially hack that employee, again, believable. Like they're not like paragliding in from a helicopter and then using some like high-tech tool to like shoot at the window so that it cuts a hole exactly the right. It's not crazy stuff. It's pretty normal, relatable things. And like, don't get me wrong, I probably couldn't actually pull off a heist, but if I did, I think it would be stuff like this. And then there'd probably be bits that were a bit frantic. Oh shit, security's coming, or alarm's gone off. And then it'd be a bit more like scrambly. Okay, I'm opening this fire escape and going down here. And I kind of value that in a heist movie or a caper movie, to have some sort of like relatability to it. This is like some of the French crime films that we've seen over the last couple of years, where people aren't doing stuff that is to a level of skill or command over your art that makes them almost superheroes. It's more like people are doing stuff where you're like, yeah, okay, you're running through a train station, you're hiding behind this post, you jump over here. Yeah, I can see that. I can see if you were kind of living and breathing this profession, that all this stuff would just kind of naturally fall into your skill set, rather than you're just superhero caper man, which is kind of what the Ocean's 11 movies are a bit more like. They're like, these guys just kind of can do anything. They've got the skeleton key to the world. So yeah, again, good movie. Liked it. And actually, I haven't checked who directed it. Was it Lawrence Kasdan or something like that? Haven't looked into the makings of it. Maybe have a dip in there, see if I've seen stuff by the writer or director, or where it comes from. It's a movie that's like Redford, Aykroyd, Sidney Poitier. None of those I have a great sense of what their career was like at that time. You've got a few movies I can mention, like Grosse Pointe Blank with Dan Aykroyd, Indecent Proposal with Redford, Sidney Poitier. I'm talking about at the 90s, the early 90s. Like, don't quite know where this film fits in. I don't know where it fits in with the director. It's just kind of a film I've heard mentioned a few times over the years as a really entertaining movie, and I feel like it measures up to that. It's probably a movie that's much better just flicking on the TV and just like, what's this? And just start watching it. That's probably where it's absolutely at its peak. Or if you're watching movie, like when it came out, we were little kids, we were like checking what was coming out. But if you just sort of go to see the new film, oh, Robert Redford's got a movie, I think it's like a crime movie or something, go to the cinema, that is when this film like would really hit. I think going to it now with like maybe some amount of expectations and all that, I really enjoyed it personally, but I don't think it's going to have that surprise factor of like, I assumed this was just like, I don't know if you've seen the film Swordfish, but it's another kind of crime caper, high-tech movie. If I was just assuming it was going to be Swordfish quality, then I'd be a huge fan of this movie, because I'd remember it as a movie that like really exceeded my expectations. Whereas because I've heard people talking about it over the years, like quite glowingly, it doesn't have that surprise factor that would be like an extra part of the sell.
Yeah, I think it's been a movie that's been largely forgotten about. I haven't heard of it prior to you. But apparently it was a massive commercial and critical success. Just to pick up on a few points regarding the comedy aspect, we've had this conversation recently with regards to genre and being too anal over, oh, well, it is a comedy. No, it isn't, because it has to have these principles. So I'm not taking that conversation down that road. What I will say, though, is I do feel a lot of the gags and a lot of the plot is revolved around comedy. But I think you could be right in the sense that this is the Ocean's 11 of the day. And that's the level of, I don't know what the word is, but the level of balance between comedy and action that was expected of the day, and it's much more got streamlined and polished since then. So the fact that this this seems a little bit broad at times is maybe because it's... One second. Sorry, yeah, I don't remember what I was saying now, but I feel like it probably is along the lines of what you're saying, that it's the precursor of something like Ocean's 11, and Soderbergh could have very well watched this and actually had an influence, and you're probably watching it in the correct way of it is intended to be, maybe, but for me, tonally, it was very much on the comedy side as much as it was the thriller side. But you're right, maybe this is the beginning of the slickness of something like this that gets streamlined later on. Yeah, it is crazy the amount of tech they got right in this. Apparently this was before the internet as we know it now, and in fact the word internet is not even used in this film, but because it's 2024 now, we can very much know where this has went. But if you go by what was known at the time, this is very much ahead of themselves. The director directed things like Field of Dreams, but I know the screenwriter wrote War Games, and I haven't seen War Games in a long time, but isn't that a type of cybery thing as well? So apparently he got the idea through that. And yeah, it's just such a fun movie. A few things that I've actually discovered just doing a bit of research. The clock tower in the opening of the movie is actually the same one used in Back to the Future. And there's a few other things as well. In the opening credits, there's weird, which I thought was coding language, but it's actually an anagram of things like Universal Pictures and Robert Redford. So it's very playful in that way. And you're right, there's so many workman-like moments in these type of heists in this movie as well that makes you think, I could probably do that. It's not something spectacular. Although it is funny that this is actually made before something like Mission Impossible or something like The Usual Suspects, because it almost feels like, because we've seen those movies first, that it's in reverse. But it's funny to think that something like this came out a few years before both of those movies. And yeah, there's one moment where they're breaking into the toy factory. Obviously, it's the cover. And one of the teams, I think it's River Phoenix, goes into the toilets. And then the guard notices, and it's a great scene. And then the guard's like, I think we have a... And then you see out the window, there's someone else dressed in the exact same gear. And so he's like, oh, he must have left without me realizing. There's nice little slick moments like that makes you think, oh, that's clever, but it's clever in a way I could do it. I remember when me and my friend were a teenager, we heard that Tulla Bank had been robbed about 7 times. Apparently it was one of the most easiest robbed banks. I don't know if this was ever true, but that's what we heard. That was the lore of the village. Me and my friends had no money, started fantasizing about, oh, we could probably pull that off if it's getting robbed every other day. And by the end of us planning the heist, we were thinking, well, we need smoke bombs, obviously. We need all these different things. So it's funny, like, just how your mind can imagine heists versus what it's actually like. And I'm a big fan of Steven Tobolowsky as well. Really like him when he shows up. He's got a podcast, actually, and apparently he was saying this movie was one of the most fun movies he ever worked on. Just the camaraderie and the vibe of everyone on set was really good, and I guess that comes across with the cast as well. But yeah, very much enjoyed this. And you were saying River Phoenix as well. I actually think River Phoenix is a good actor, but apparently the reason why he picked this was because coming off, I think it was My Private Idaho, it fucked him up quite a bit. So he just wanted the most easy movie he could do and phone it in almost. So he picked Sneakers, and his role isn't too challenging in it at all. But yeah, I'd actually like to try a few Robert Redford movies after this, because I think if anything stands out about this movie the most, it's that just how much of a star he is and how cool he is. Obviously, I felt it with Paul Newman before and did quite a deep dive, but I'd love to go on a Robert Redford's deep dive. Maybe not on the most famous ones. I think I've seen the one with Dustin Hoffman. Is it All the President's Men? I think Robert Redford's in that. I really like that movie. And well, I've seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. That was okay. But maybe some of the other ones that don't come straight to mind, like that other heist movie I came across today that I sent you a link to. It'd be nice to see what else Robert Redford's got to offer. Oh yeah, one other final thing which was funny. So obviously when we get that opening scene in the old TV resolution, and one of them doesn't get away, I'm expecting that guy to show up as the bad guy later on in the movie quite quickly. But the biggest example of that was in the latest Bad Boys I've seen, where a character just shows up and says absolutely nothing. And I'm like, oh, well, he's the bad guy of the movie. And lo and behold, that happens as well in record time. I'm also a big fan of Enhance. Love Enhance. And they do this quite ridiculously, because with the Enhance, we actually barely see the progression, whereas normally we see Enhance and then it gets closer and closer, and then the footage improves, where in this is like it's getting blurrier and blurrier. And if I didn't love Enhance as much as the next person, I'd be thinking this is pretty damn ridiculous and pretty damn dated. But maybe this is the best Enhance I've seen in a while. And even when they're trying to find the password, I kept on thinking, what are they talking about that this woman is blocking the shot? And then I realized, oh, they're trying to see the keyboard. So yeah, I don't know if that was just me missing something to begin with, but it was a very useful Enhanced as far as plot points go as well.
Yeah, I'm well up for watching more Redfords. I think there's quite a few blind spots. I have seen Butch Cassidy and The Sting and a few other kind of noteworthy Redford movies, but I think there's quite a few of his most iconic movies that I haven't seen. And then beyond that, I'd imagine there's a wealth of hidden gems across his catalogue. So yeah, bring on the Redford, definitely up for watching some of that. Funnily enough, I've never actually seen Field of Dreams. It's in that, you know, everyone's got those like movies that are, it's almost like embarrassing blind spots where you're like, I can't explain it. It's been mentioned, it's been referenced in my company thousands of times. I'm well aware of the movie. I can even quote parts of the movie, but for one reason or other, I just haven't bothered to check it out. Field of Dreams is like right up there, like probably a top 50 most famous movies I haven't seen. So that's another one I need to amend. But looking at his IMDb, this director, he's done Field of Dreams, which is obviously like super popular, iconic movie. Then he's done Sneakers, which you tell me was a massive hit when it came out. And that's kind of it. Like, I think he might have done the Sum of All Fears, Ben Affleck movie, maybe, or something like that. He's got one or two kind of vaguely known movies, but yeah, for the most part, he's just kind of disappeared, which is a bit weird. I wonder what the story behind that is. Maybe the movie after Sneakers was a big flop or something. It's interesting that the writer wrote War Games. It definitely evokes War Games here and there, although War Games is more camp and War Games is earlier, so it's like even more early networking. But this writer, I wonder, were they like a computer person or something, because they basically have written like the two most iconic pre-internet networking thrillers. So I wonder what the story is there. Maybe they just had the in, or the like they knew what was coming. Yeah, interesting about the Back to the Future time and the opening. That opening is so cool. Like the fact that you go from this like stylized title sequence to then the sort of square, it's like a light fanning out in a square aspect ratio with the title Sneakers, and then that kind of like fades to the location and we're still square, and we see that opening scene where one of the actors, Redford is in the movie, so when you see that young actor, you're like, that's Redford. Casting is on point. And then you see the other actor and you're like, I wonder who I mean, I actually didn't know Kingsley was in it, so I was looking at that actor, I was like, who is this? I was thinking, is it going to be John Lovitz? Or there's a few actors running through my head as who could be the older version of this person. And when it turns out to be Kingsley, it's like, yeah, that fits. I like that. And then I always like an aspect ratio change to segregate the past and the present. Like that's a cool little trick. And it's interesting what you say there about it being older than films like Mission Impossible, which do take it to this extreme level. If we're going to do a heist, then we're going to have to like use like sci-fi technology and crazy stunts and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. If you go back pre Mission Impossible 1 might be a watershed moment, because if you go back anything from the early 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, which were full of caper movies, full of heist movies, it's always more relatable. It's, the classic like stick the chewing gum in the locks and stuff like that, like little things that you could actually imagine doing. And now here we sit in the 2020s, completely bereft of those kind of movies, those tactile, relatable heist movies, caper movies. And going back to them now, it just makes me think like that's such a missed opportunity, because there's such a thrill about watching people pull off something where you go, I don't know if I'd get away with that. I don't know if I'd think of that. I don't know if I would string it all together. But I could do all those things. Like physically, I could do all those things. It's not like I have to, scale the Burj Khalifa, which I couldn't do. They're doing all things I could do, but would I have the confidence? Would I have the imagination? That's great. Like, and I say this as a massive fan of the Mission Impossible franchise and have enjoyed some of the Fast and the Furious and stuff. Like, I also am happy to see really extravagant, stunt-filled, CGI, crazy explosion-filled caper movies, but I think we've lost something there, and I feel like that's a great opportunity for smaller indie movies to swoop in and maybe do a few of these kind of understated, more realistic crime caper movies. That'd be something that would be great to see. Yeah, let's check out some more Redford. Happy we hit this one. I'm curious about how the director kind of went from Field of Dreams to this, to just kind of messing up their career. But yeah, maybe there's a story there. And yeah, this was a really, really solid movie. They don't make them like this anymore. It's the classic, like, people always bemoan the loss of the mid-budget movie and the Jerry Maguires, the star-studded but not special effects blockbuster dramas, and this, if you feel like the turn of the millennium was the kind of death knell of that, then this movie is part of a dying breed, really.
Yeah, just to go down what happened, this director rabbit hole. So after Sneakers, so he comes in hot with Field of Dreams, which is a very good movie from my memory from a long time ago. So I don't know what that means. Love Kevin Costner. Ray Liotta's in it as well. Quite a bunch of people are in it. Then he does Sneakers 3 years later. Very well received critically and commercially. Then he waits 8 years to do a movie called Freedom Song, which is a made for TV movie, which is absolutely crazy from going from the first two movies. And I think Field of Dreams won an Academy Award, or at least was nominated for an Academy Award. Then he does Sum of All Fears, which was terrible. I remember seeing that in the cinema. I think we may have seen that in the cinema together, but I can't remember. Then he does The Angriest Man in Brooklyn, starring Robert Williams, and that got like 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. In between that, he's directed an episode of Band of Brothers, so he was chosen for 1 of 10 episodes of Band of Brothers, along with some very good directors, most of them TV, but very good directors, like Tim Van Patten, people like that. Then he directs an episode of The Good Wife, and most recently I think he's the showrunner or directing loads of episodes for a spin-off of that called The Good Fight. So that's what he's been up to, which is crazy. I was trying to find information of why that happened, and there isn't really anything about it. Maybe he turned his back on Hollywood for a bit. 8 years after Sneakers is quite a big gap. He has some stage play credits, but most of them are before Field of Dreams and Sneakers. But just to also say what you're saying in relation to the heists, it's a bit like with James Bond, when it started off doing basic spy stuff and it culminated in him surfing into massive waves in one of the Pierce Brosnan movies, or there's one movie where there's a massive laser and all these crazy things. You have to just keep going. The only heist movie that I saw in recent times that gave me that feel a little, even though I can't really remember much about it, was American Animals, which was a true story. And from what I remember, it juxtaposed the real life people telling the story, and then it dramatized it with people like Barry Keoghan, I believe, and a few others which I can't remember. That was something that really brought a level of DIY heist. But yeah, just giving you some information on that director there. It's fucking bizarre. It's not like he has a reputation that hard to work with. But yeah, let's get on the Robert Redford train.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.